I am Joshua, 37 years old, and my entitled sister-in-law just tried to stick me with a $1,240 bill for a birthday dinner I specifically didn't invite her to. Before I tell you how I turned the tables, walked out, and watched her luxury car get repossessed, let me know where you guys are watching from in the comments. I always love seeing how far these stories reach. Let me start by telling you a little bit about how my brain works. I am a logistics director. My entire career, my daily routine, and honestly my sanity, all revolve around capacity management. You cannot fit a 50-foot shipping container onto a 40-foot chassis. It does not matter how much you want it to fit. It does not matter if you cry about it. It does not matter if you insist that the container is family. Physics does not negotiate, and neither do I. Tonight was supposed to be completely stress-free. Tonight was my son Isaac's 10th birthday. Double digits. The big 10. If you are a parent or a grandparent listening to this, you know that turning 10 is a massive bridge. It is the bridge between being a little kid and stepping into young manhood. It is a milestone, and I wanted it to be absolutely perfect for him. I had planned this dinner with the precision of a military operation. I do not leave things to chance. The guest list was curated down to the exact chair. It was going to be me, my wife Emily, Isaac's 3 best friends from school, their parents, and my own parents. That is exactly 12 seats. 12 human beings. 12 place settings. I chose Luca's Italian Steakhouse. For those of you who know good food, you know a place like Luca's isn't some cheap chain restaurant where you can just slide a couple of sticky tables together and demand extra breadsticks. It is old school. Mahogany wood paneling, dim ambient lighting, and waiters wearing crisp white jackets who use a little metal tool to scrape the crumbs off the tablecloth between your courses. It is the kind of place where you make a reservation 3 weeks in advance, and you secure it with a credit card, which I did. I requested the back alcove. It is a beautiful, semi-private space in the back of the main dining room with one long, heavy oak table. It is perfect for conversation, away from the loud noise of the main floor. I wanted Isaac to feel like a king holding court with his best buddies. Everything was set. The appetizers were pre-ordered to hit the table at 6:45 p.m. sharp. Fried calamari for the boys, authentic bruschetta and burrata for the adults. I had confirmed the head count with the restaurant twice that morning. But there is one variable in my life that defies all logic. One variable that ignores capacity, budget, and basic human decency. My sister-in-law, Chloe. Chloe is 42 years old, and she is what people nowadays call the golden child. I call her a natural disaster. You know the exact type of person I am talking about. She is the one who borrows money and suddenly calls it a gift when you ask for it back. She is the one who shows up to a family potluck completely empty-handed but is the first one in line with Tupperware to take the best leftovers home. She firmly believes the world owes her a living. Unfortunately, her parents, my in-laws Robert and Mary, have spent 4 decades convincing her she is absolutely right. I did not invite Chloe. I did not invite her husband, Dylan. I did not invite their 3 teenagers. And I certainly did not invite Chloe's best friend, Ashley, or Ashley's 2 toddlers who scream at a decibel level that can shatter bulletproof glass. So, imagine my state of mind when I walked through the heavy double wooden doors of Luca's at 6:30 p.m. I was adjusting my jacket, feeling great. I had my hand resting on Isaac's shoulder. He was clutching a new video game I had given him earlier, flashing this huge, gap-toothed grin. Emily looked beautiful, though I could feel her hand trembling just a little bit in mine. She always gets nervous before family events. Mostly because she knows her older sister is a ticking time bomb. But I squeezed her hand. I looked right at her and said, "It is going to be fine. Chloe isn't coming. It's just us." Famous last words. I approached the host's stand. The maitre d', Julian, is a man I have known for years. Usually, Julian possesses the calm, unbreakable demeanor of a bomb disposal expert. Nothing rattles this guy. He has seen drunken fights, spilled red wine on wedding dresses, and declined black cards without even blinking. But tonight, Julian looked pale. He looked like he was actively sweating through his expensive suit. "Joshua," Julian said, his voice unusually tight. He forced a smile and looked down at my son. "Happy birthday, Isaac." "Thanks, Julian," I said, smiling back. "We are ready for the alcove. The rest of the party should be pulling into the valet any minute." Julian winced. He physically flinched. He leaned over the polished wood of the host stand, whispering so Isaac wouldn't hear. "Joshua, we have a situation." My stomach dropped. "What situation?" "Your party," Julian whispered, his eyes darting toward the dining room. "They arrived early, and there are more of them than we anticipated. Significantly more." I frowned, shaking my head. "That's impossible. My parents just texted that they are parking. The other parents are 5 minutes out. No one is here yet." Julian cleared his throat. "Your sister-in-law, Chloe. She arrived 20 minutes ago. She informed my staff she was taking charge of the seating arrangements." I felt the blood drain from my face. I looked over at Emily. Her eyes went completely wide. "Chloe," Emily whispered, her voice cracking. "I didn't tell her the time. I didn't even tell her the day. Who is with her?" I looked back at Julian, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. "Who is with her, Julian?" "Everyone," Julian said helplessly, throwing his hands up a fraction of an inch. "Her husband, her children, her parents, and another lady with 2 babies in high chairs." I didn't wait to hear another word. I let go of Emily's hand, walked past the host stand, turned the sharp corner into the main dining room, and stopped dead in my tracks. My carefully reserved alcove, the sanctuary I had pictured and paid for weeks in advance, looked like a frat house cafeteria after a football game. The table for 12 was completely full, but it wasn't Isaac's friends sitting there. Sitting at the very head of the table, in the large armchair specifically reserved for the birthday boy, was Chloe. She was holding a massive crystal wine glass, laughing loudly, her head thrown back. Next to her was Dylan, looking like he was already 2 drinks deep, his face flushed. Next to them were their 3 teenagers, all slouched over, glaring at their phones and ignoring the world. Filling out the rest of the chairs were my in-laws, Robert and Mary, who we specifically did not invite because we wanted a stress-free night, and Ashley, Chloe's friend, whose 2 toddlers were currently banging heavy silver spoons against Luca's imported china plates. Clang, clang, clang. 10 people, not a single one of them invited, and standing awkwardly in the hallway just outside the alcove, looking like stranded passengers at an airport gate, were my actual guests. Isaac's best friend, his parents, and my own mother and father. They were huddled together, holding wrapped gifts, staring in absolute confusion at the table where Chloe was currently holding court. My father looked at me, his eyes asking a silent, urgent question. "What is happening?" I felt a massive wave of heat rising in my chest. It wasn't just anger. It was a violation. This was my son's night. Chloe finally saw me. She didn't look ashamed. She didn't look the least bit embarrassed. She threw her arms up in the air, nearly knocking over a water glass, and screamed across the restaurant. "Joshua, you're finally here," she shrieked. "Surprise!" Half the restaurant turned to look at us. "We decided to make it a real family affair," Chloe announced loudly, gesturing grandly to the hijacked table. "You can't turn 10 without the whole village, right? We got here early to secure the spot. I told that stiff guy at the front that we were the main party. He tried to give us grief about numbers, but I told him to just squeeze in some extra chairs." I looked at the table. There was no room to squeeze in a napkin, let alone 10 more human beings. The alcove was legally designed for 12. There were 10 people sitting there, and their heavy winter coats and designer knockoff bags were sprawled over the only 2 remaining chairs. "Chloe," I said, my voice low, level, and ice-cold, "where is Isaac going to sit?" "Oh, we'll figure it out." She waved a dismissive hand at me. Reaching into the center of the table, she ripped off a huge chunk of crusty artisan bread and stuffed it into her mouth. "The kids can squeeze into a booth over by the bar or something. Or maybe the adults can just stand around and mingle." "Yeah, Josh, loosen up, man," Dylan chimed in. He grabbed a dark green bottle and poured himself more wine. We ordered a few bottles to get the party started. I looked at the label facing me. A 2018 Barolo. I know that wine. That bottle is $140 on the menu. I counted the empties. They had already opened 3. That was $420 in wine before I had even taken my coat off. Before my son had even been told happy birthday. I turned and looked at Isaac. He was standing by the entrance of the alcove, tightly clutching his game. He wasn't looking at the food. He was looking directly at his Aunt Chloe occupying his birthday throne. He didn't look angry. He looked entirely defeated. He looked like he knew, deep down in his 10-year-old heart, that his special night had just been ruined. That specific look on my son's face, that was the exact moment the switch in my brain flipped. "Get up," I said. The entire table went dead quiet. Ashley's toddler stopped banging the spoon. "Excuse me?" Chloe laughed. It was a nervous, high-pitched, grating sound. "Joshua, don't be rude. We're family. We drove 40 minutes in traffic to be here." "You weren't invited," I said, my voice cutting through the silence like a knife. "This is a reservation for 12. There are 12 actual, invited guests standing right there in the hallway. You are occupying their seats. Get up." "Well, you can't just kick us out." Chloe's voice rose dramatically, instantly attracting the attention of diners 3 tables away. "That's humiliating. Look, just tell the waiter to push some tables together. We'll make it a big long table. The more the merrier." I looked at Julian, who had silently appeared at my elbow. "Julian," I asked calmly, "can we combine tables?" Julian shook his head sadly, playing his part perfectly. "I am sorry, Joshua. It is a Saturday night. We are fully booked. I cannot block the fire aisle. The capacity of this section is strictly enforced. Fire marshal regulations." I turned my eyes back to Chloe. "You heard him. Move." Chloe crossed her arms over her chest. Her face set into that stubborn, deeply entitled mask I had seen 1,000 times over the last decade. It was the exact same mask she wore when she borrowed money she never intended to pay back. "No," she said flatly. "We are seated. We have already ordered. We are staying. If you want to be a terrible, toxic father and ruin Isaac's birthday by making a massive public scene, that is completely on you. But I am not moving my family." She casually picked up a leather-bound menu. "Now, I think I'm going to have the lobster risotto." I stood there for 3 seconds. In my line of work, you constantly assess liability, leverage, and risk. If I screamed at her, I lost the moral high ground and ruined the night. If I physically tried to remove Dylan from his chair, I would leave in handcuffs. If I sent my invited guests away, I broke my son's heart and severely damaged my relationships with his friends' parents. But there was another option, the logistical pivot. Before I get to the pivot, and believe me, the explosion that happens later is worth the wait, you need to understand exactly why I didn't just pay the bill. People always ask me, "Joshua, why is your sister-in-law like this? Why didn't you just keep the peace?" The answer lies in the deeply flawed architecture of my wife's family. My wife, Emily, is the younger sister. Chloe is 5 years older. In any normal, healthy family dynamic, the older sibling blazes the trail and protects the younger one. In Emily's family, Chloe scorched the earth, salted the fields, and Emily was expected to plant seeds in the ashes. My in-laws, Robert and Mary, are what you would call nice people on paper. They volunteer at their local church. They bake cookies for neighborhood bake sales. But they have a fatal, destructive flaw. They absolutely enable Chloe's worst behavior. They have systematically created a monster by never, ever letting her face a single consequence for her actions. When Chloe failed out of her first year of college, it wasn't because she partied too much. It was the professor's fault for being too demanding. When Chloe got fired from her cushy marketing job, it was because her boss was jealous of her creativity. When Chloe's first marriage ended in a bitter divorce, it was because her ex-husband was too controlling. Knowing Chloe, being controlling probably just meant he asked her to stop spending their mortgage money on designer handbags and expensive brunches. And then there is the money. My relationship with money is very simple and straightforward. I grew up with a father who worked brutal, long shifts in a regional distribution warehouse. I know the exact value of a hard-earned dollar. I work incredibly hard for my salary, I invest quietly, and I save aggressively. I am a silent partner in a few lucrative ventures now, but I do not flash it. I drive a 4-year-old truck that gets me from point A to point B. I wear sensible, comfortable boots. Chloe, on the other hand, drives a leased Porsche Cayenne that she absolutely cannot afford. She wears designer labels that still have the price tags carefully tucked inside the collar, so she can wear them once for an Instagram picture and return them the next day. She lives entirely for the image of wealth, without putting in a single hour of the labor required to achieve it. She thinks she is royalty, and she expects everyone around her to pay the royal tax. Let me give you the receipts. I am not joking when I say I keep a mental spreadsheet. I call it the Chloe file. Exhibit A. Isaac's 5th birthday party. 5 years ago, Chloe aggressively insisted on handling the entertainment. She told Emily she had found an amazing deal on a giant inflatable bounce house. "I'll book it right now," she told me over the phone. "You just Venmo me the $300 deposit." I sent her the $300 immediately. On the day of the party, 20 kids showed up to our backyard. No bounce house, just an empty lawn and a dozen 5-year-olds standing around crying. When I finally got Chloe on the phone, she gave me a dramatic sigh. "Oh my God, Joshua. The company canceled on me last minute. Can you believe how unprofessional they are?" A week later, Dylan got drunk at a family barbecue and let it slip. Chloe never booked the bounce house. She used the $300 I sent her to pay off a massive speeding ticket she got in a school zone so her premium insurance rates wouldn't skyrocket. Did I ever see a dime of that money back? Absolutely not. When I confronted my mother-in-law, Mary, she literally patted my arm and said, "Just let it go, Joshua. Chloe was too embarrassed to tell you the truth. She has so much anxiety right now. Don't make her feel worse over a few dollars." Exhibit B. The emergency car repair. Just last year, Chloe called Emily in absolute hysterics. She was stranded on the side of the highway. She said she desperately needed $500 for a new alternator or she wouldn't be able to get her kids to school the next day. Emily was in tears, begging me to help her sister. "It's for the kids, Josh. We can't let my nieces and nephews suffer." Against my better judgment, I wired the $500 directly into Chloe's bank account. 2 days later, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from Instagram. Chloe had posted a picture of herself and Ashley at a high-end luxury spa downtown. They were wearing plush white robes, holding mimosas, with cucumbers on their eyes. The caption read, "Much-needed self-care day with my bestie. #blessed #luxury life." When I called her out on it, she didn't even flinch. "Oh, Dylan managed to fix the car himself with some spare parts, so we saved the money. I was so stressed out. I thought you'd want me to use the funds to focus on my mental health and be happy." That was the exact day the Bank of Joshua closed its doors permanently. I told Emily, never again. Not a single red cent. But the subtle, exhausting pressure never stopped. My in-laws constantly dropped heavy hints. "Joshua, we heard you got that big promotion at the firm. Chloe is really struggling with her lease payments right now. Maybe you could help them refinance." Or, "Joshua, we saw you guys are booking a trip to Disney World. It really is a shame Chloe's kids have never been. Maybe if you rented a large villa, it would be affordable for them to tag along." Translation: you pay for the massive villa, you pay for the park tickets, and they crash in the spare bedrooms while eating your groceries. They viewed my bank account as a communal family resource. And worse, they viewed my patience as an infinite, renewable energy source. Which brings us right back to the restaurant. The only reason I was so militant about keeping this reservation a secret was that I knew Chloe was sniffing around for a free meal. 2 weeks ago, Emily was on the phone with Mary. I walked into the kitchen just in time to hear Emily say, "Yes, Mom. We're doing Lucas for Isaac's 10th. It's his absolute favorite." I frantically signaled to Emily to stop talking, to cut the conversation off. But it was too late. The intel had been leaked. I knew Mary would immediately tell Chloe, and I knew Chloe would see this as a prime opportunity. You see, Chloe loves to play the role of the incredibly rich, generous aunt. As long as she isn't spending her own money. She loves to show off to her friends, especially Ashley. Oh, we're having a lavish private dinner at Luca's tonight. My brother-in-law is treating us all. We are just so close. She brought Ashley and her screaming toddlers tonight for one reason only. Chloe wanted an audience. She wanted to sit at the head of a massive table, confidently order the most expensive wine on the list, and have Ashley sit there thinking, wow, Chloe really has it made. She was heavily banking on my social conditioning. She was banking on the fact that I am a professional man who hates causing a public scene in a fine dining establishment. She was banking on the fact that I love Emily deeply and wouldn't want to upset her parents in public. She was right about one thing. I do hate causing a scene, but she was dead wrong about the rest. She forgot that I am a man of logistics. And in logistics, when a primary route is suddenly blocked by a massive, immovable obstacle, you do not crash your truck into the barricade. You reroute. I looked at Julian. I saw the sheer panic in his eyes. He was the maitre d', the man responsible for the flow of the entire restaurant, and right now, his floor was a disaster. But underneath that panic, I also saw respect. Julian knew me. He knew I tipped well, he knew I treated his staff with dignity, and most importantly, he knew I was a man of my word. I stepped forward, put a firm hand on Julian's shoulder, and gently guided him a few steps away from the chaos of table 4. Julian, I said softly, keeping my back to Chloe so she couldn't read my lips, do you still have the executive boardroom available in the back? The one you guys use for corporate meetings with the AV equipment. Julian's eyes widened, and a spark of understanding lit up his face. The boardroom? Yes, Joshua. It is completely empty tonight, but it is separated from the main dining floor. It is very, very quiet back there. Perfect, I said. Here is what we are going to do. I want you to move the birthday party, the real one, the 12 people standing in the hallway, into the executive room right now. Set it up for 12. Move the centerpieces. Move Isaac's birthday cake to the back. I paused, tilting my head slightly toward the circus happening at the alcove. Dylan was currently laughing aggressively and pouring the last drops of the Burlo into Ashley's glass. They seem very comfortable, I said, my tone completely flat. Leave them exactly where they are. Do not ask them to move. They are a completely separate party. Julian nodded slowly, absorbing the instructions. Understood. And the billing, sir? This is the part where you need to pay close attention, because this is the exact moment I decided to let gravity do its heavy lifting. I reached into my inside jacket pocket and pulled out my wallet. I did not extract my personal debit card. I pulled out my heavy, metal corporate black card. This card covers the party in the executive room, I said, tapping the metal edge against Julian's clipboard. The 12 guests I explicitly invited. My wife, my son, my parents, and his friends' families. No one else. I am paying for their food, their drinks, and a generous tip for whoever serves us back there. Not a single penny more. And table 4? Julian asked, glancing nervously at the empty $140 wine bottles Chloe and Dylan were guzzling like tap water. Table 4 is an independent group of walk-ins, I said clearly, making sure there was zero room for misinterpretation. Treat them as you would any random guests off the street. Separate check. They order what they want, and you hand the bill directly to the man sitting at the table. Do not authorize any charges to my card from that table. If they try to tell your waiter to put it on my tab, you decline it immediately. Is that crystal clear? Julian smiled. It wasn't his usual polite customer service smile. It was a small, sharp, highly professional smile. Very clear, Joshua. I will inform Kevin, their server, immediately. I walked back to the lobby where my family was huddled. I gathered Isaac, Emily, my parents, and the other confused families. Change of plans, everyone, I announced, putting on my absolute best, warmest host smile. There was a slight mix-up with the main seating arrangements, but Julian is incredible and he has actually upgraded us to the private executive suite in the back. It's much more exclusive, and we can be as loud as we want. Follow me. Isaac's face instantly lit up. The disappointment vanished. A suite? Like for VIPs. A suite just for us, buddy? I promised, ruffling his hair. We bypassed the main dining room entirely. I led the group down the long, carpeted side corridor, past the bustling kitchen doors, and into the quiet, heavily soundproofed sanctuary of the back room. It was gorgeous. Dark wood paneling, pristine white tablecloths, and complete privacy. But before the heavy oak door closed behind us, I had to do one last thing to set the bait. As we walked past the wide archway that led to the main dining room, Chloe spotted us leaving. "Hey, where are you going?" she shouted, half rising from her chair, her napkin falling to the floor. "We found another table," I called back over my shoulder, keeping my voice cheerful and deliberately vague. "You guys just stay right there. Enjoy the food. We'll catch up with you after dessert." "Oh, great," Chloe yelled back, sinking heavily into her chair. She looked incredibly triumphant. She looked over at Ashley and let out a loud, bragging laugh. "See? I told you he'd handle it. He always caves." I stood in the doorway for a brief second and watched her. She turned her attention immediately to Kevin, the young waiter who had just nervously approached their table. "Order the calamari for the table," I heard Chloe scream at Kevin, pointing aggressively at the menu. "And bring us another bottle of that red wine. We absolutely love it." She was literally pouring another massive glass of the Barolo as I watched. She genuinely thought she had won. She thought she had successfully bullied me into expanding the party, absorbing her massive intrusion into my budget just like my in-laws always expected me to. She thought the Bank of Joshua was open for business and footing the bill for her fake-rich lifestyle. I stepped into the executive room and let the heavy oak doors click shut. The chaotic noise of the main restaurant instantly vanished, replaced by the soft hum of the air conditioning and the jazz music playing softly from the ceiling speakers. "Wow, this is really nice," Sam's dad, one of Isaac's friends, said, looking around admiringly at the vintage black and white photos of the city on the walls. "Way better than being out there on the main floor." "Nothing but the absolute best for Isaac," I said, taking my seat at the head of this table, the one I actually paid for, and I meant every word of it. But as I sat down and unfolded my crisp linen napkin, I discreetly checked my watch. It was 6:55 p.m. The fuse had been officially lit. 40 feet away, through a few soundproof walls, my sister-in-law was currently ordering high-end seafood and vintage wine. She was performing for her friend, playing the wealthy socialite, and she had absolutely no idea that she was currently eating on her own dime. While the storm was brewing out on the main floor, the atmosphere inside the executive room was pure peace. It was exactly what I had envisioned for my son. The appetizers arrived right on schedule. Hot, crispy calamari for the boys, who immediately started fighting over the marinara sauce. Slices of toasted bruschetta loaded with fresh basil, garlic, and heirloom tomatoes for the adults. The waiters assigned to our room were phenomenal. They treated Isaac like a young prince, bringing him a special mocktail, in a tall glass loaded with 3 maraschino cherries and a tiny paper umbrella. He was laughing so hard his face was turning red. I looked across the table at Emily. She was sitting next to my mother, sipping a crisp glass of Pinot Grigio. For the first time in weeks, she looked genuinely relaxed. Her shoulders, which are usually tightly raised and tense whenever Chloe is within a 5-mile radius, had dropped. She was laughing at a story my dad was telling about an old fishing trip. "This room is amazing, Josh," my dad said, leaning over his plate. "How did you manage to swing this at the last minute on a Saturday night?" "Just lucky, Dad," I said, winking at Isaac. "Julian likes us." I didn't tell them about the war that was raging just on the other side of the restaurant. I didn't tell them that at table 4, Chloe was currently running up a tab that was going to require a small mortgage to pay off. I knew exactly what was happening because my phone, sitting quietly next to my water glass, vibrated. It was a text message from Julian. Julian. Sir, Table 4 has just ordered the Grand Plateau Seafood Tower, $180. They also requested a 4th bottle of the Barolo. And the gentleman, Dylan, has ordered the tomahawk ribeye. Julian. Should I intervene? I stared at the glowing screen of my phone. The tomahawk ribeye. At Luca's, that is a market price item. It isn't even listed with a dollar amount on the menu. It usually runs about $120 minimum. It is a massive, incredibly thick cut of steak with a huge bone sticking out of it, meant to look like a caveman's club. It's the kind of thing you order when you want the entire dining room to stare at your table when the waiter brings it out. Dylan ordered that. Of course, he did. Dylan is a guy who works exactly 25 hours a week at a local hardware store. But whenever he is out in public, he talks loudly like he manages a Wall Street hedge fund. He loves to act sophisticated and powerful, strictly on someone else's dime. He ordered the tomahawk not because he was genuinely craving an ungodly amount of beef, but because it was the most obnoxiously expensive thing he could point to. I quickly typed my response under the table. Me, do not intervene. Let them order whatever they want. Just make absolutely sure Kevin keeps their check completely separate. And please tell our waiter to bring out the main courses whenever they are ready. I put my phone face down on the table. Emily noticed the movement and gently touched my arm. Is everything okay out there? She asked softly, her eyes searching my face. I looked at her. I love this woman more than anything in the world. But for the entire 10 years we had been married, she had been an emotional hostage to her sister's endless, chaotic drama. She had been conditioned to flinch, to apologize, and to sacrifice our own peace to keep Chloe from throwing a tantrum. Tonight I was going to set her free, not by screaming at Chloe in a parking lot, but by simply letting the heavy anvil of reality fall directly onto Chloe's head. Everything is perfect, I told Emily, and I smiled. Look at him. Isaac is having the best birthday of his life. And he was. The main courses arrived for us. A perfectly cooked filet mignon for me, a beautiful piece of grilled salmon for my mom, and giant bowls of spaghetti and meatballs for the boys. The conversation flowed effortlessly. We talked about Isaac's recent soccer games, we talked about upcoming summer plans, we shared stories. It was the respectful, normal family gathering I had dreamed of. But the entire time I was chewing my steak, the clock in my head was ticking. Tick, tick, tick. Every single bite of lobster Chloe took was adding to the catastrophic total. Every sip of vintage wine Dylan swallowed was interest compounding. I glanced at my watch again. 8:30 p.m. They would be finishing up their main courses soon. In about 30 minutes, the kitchen would start firing up the espresso machine. The dessert menus would be handed out. And then, the little black leather folder containing the bill would make its journey to table 4. I took a slow sip of my ice water and mentally prepared myself. Because when that bill finally hit the table, the screaming was going to be loud enough to wake the dead. To fully appreciate what is about to happen, I need to paint a picture of what was actually going on at table 4 while we were safely hidden away. I know all these details because Kevin, the waiter, and Julian filled me in extensively later that night, and honestly because I know my in-laws better than I know my own morning commute. Table 4 wasn't just having dinner. They were putting on a theatrical production. When that $180 seafood tower arrived, 3 literal tiers of crushed ice loaded with fresh oysters, jumbo shrimp, Alaskan crab legs, and lobster tails. Chloe made sure the entire restaurant noticed. She literally stood up from her chair to take flash photography with her phone. She made Ashley pose holding a massive crab claw next to her face. She was loud, obnoxious, and utterly shameless. "Nothing but the best tonight," she practically shouted to the tables next to her. "My brother-in-law is treating us. He insists." Dylan, emboldened by the massive amount of alcohol in his system, spent 20 minutes aggressively lecturing young Kevin about the proper way a kitchen should rest a steak before serving it. The teenagers didn't speak a single word to anyone. They just kept their heads down, glued to TikTok, mechanically shoveling expensive truffle pasta into their mouths like it was fast food. Ashley's toddlers were throwing half-chewed bread rolls onto the floor. And my in-laws, Robert and Mary? They were sitting there, eating the expensive seared scallops, but I imagine they were slightly nervous. They knew I wasn't at the table. They knew my parents weren't at the table. But Chloe had confidently assured them. "Oh, Joshua is just in the back room with the boring people," Chloe had told Mary, waving her fork. "He told us to just order whatever we want. It's all going on one massive tab at the end of the night." Mary wanted to believe it. She always wants to believe the fantasy where we are one big, happy, communist collective family where my hard-earned salary is everyone's money. So she ate the scallops. She drank the wine. She let herself be lulled into the false, warm security of her golden child's lies. Back in the executive room, around 9 p.m., we finished our desserts. We had classic tiramisu for the adults, and the waiters brought out a giant, sparkler-lit gelato sundae for Isaac. Everyone sang "Happy Birthday." Isaac closed his eyes tight, blew out the candles, and made a wish. I don't know what he wished for, but I hope he wished for a dad with a titanium spine, because that is exactly what he was getting tonight. As the empty dessert plates were being cleared, there was a soft, urgent knock on the heavy oak door. Julian slipped inside, closing the door firmly behind him. He looked like he had just witnessed a murder. He walked quickly over to my chair and leaned down so close I could smell his cologne. "Joshua," he whispered, his voice trembling slightly, "could I please have a word outside?" I wiped my mouth carefully with my linen napkin and stood up, buttoning my jacket. "Excuse me for just a moment, everyone," I said casually to the table. Emily looked up from her coffee, a sharp question forming in her eyes. I gave her a slow, reassuring nod. "Just stepping out to settle the bill, honey. Be right back." I stepped out into the hallway, and the door clicked shut behind me. The noise of the main dining room hit me like a physical wave. Clattering dishes, loud chatter, the low, chaotic hum of a busy Saturday night service. "The party at table 4, Julian said, his voice dropping to a frantic whisper. "They are ready to leave. They asked Kevin for the check to be added directly to yours." "And you told them?" I asked. "I told them exactly what you instructed," Julian replied, wiping a bead of sweat from his forehead. "I instructed Kevin to inform them that the party in the executive room had already settled their bill in full, and that table 4 is a completely separate transaction." Julian winced, closing his eyes for a second. "Joshua, the lady, Chloe, she is creating a massive disturbance. She says she absolutely refuses to pay. She claims you invited her and that we are trying to scam her. She is actively shouting at Kevin right now. She is demanding to see you." I calmly checked my watch. It was 9:15 p.m. Perfect timing. "I'll handle it," I said, adjusting my cuffs. "Joshua, wait." Julian hesitated, putting a hand out. "She is being very aggressive. Do you want me to call restaurant security?" "Not yet," I said. "Let me talk to them first." "But Julian, do you have the receipt for table 4 handy? I want to see the itemized list before I walk out there." "I have it right here." Julian handed me a sleek black leather folder. I flipped it open and scanned the glowing white thermal paper. 4X Burlo 2018, $560, 1X Grand Plateau Seafood Tower, $180, 1X Tomahawk Ribeye, market price, $125, 2X Lobster Risotto, $90 appetizers, sides, desserts, cocktails, subtotal, $1,150 tax, $90 total, $1,240. My jaw physically tightened. I felt a muscle ticking in my cheek. They had spent over $1,200. Completely uninvited. "Wait," I muttered, looking at the top line. "I thought it was 3 bottles of wine. They ordered a 4th bottle right after you went into the back room," Julian whispered, reading my mind. "And Dylan ordered a round of expensive limoncello shots for the adults just before the check arrived." Of course they did. I snapped the leather folder shut and handed it back to Julian. "Okay, let's go." I walked purposefully down the hallway. I didn't even have to look for table 4. I could hear Chloe's piercing voice before I even turned the corner into the main dining room. This is ridiculous. This is illegal. You cannot charge US for this. I turned the corner. The scene was an absolute disaster zone. Table 4 was covered in the grotesque debris of gluttony. Crumpled napkins littered the floor. Dark purple wine spills stained the pristine white tablecloth. Half-eaten lobster shells were piled high on plates. And standing right in the center of the carnage was Chloe. She was out of her chair, leaning aggressively over the table, screaming at Kevin, the terrified 20-year-old waiter who looked like he was about to cry. "I am not paying this," Chloe yelled, her voice echoing off the mahogany walls. "Do you have any idea who we are? My brother-in-law is in the back room. Go get him right now. He is the one with the money. Put this on his tab." "I am right here," I said. My voice wasn't a shout. It was a calm, heavy baritone, but it cut through the noise of the restaurant like a gunshot. Chloe spun around so fast she almost tripped over her own chair. Her face was flushed dark red from the 4 bottles of wine and the sheer, unadulterated rage. Her expensive lipstick was smeared slightly across her chin. She looked like a messy, angry toddler throwing a tantrum in a grocery store. "Joshua," she hissed, pointing a manicured finger at Kevin. "What the hell is this? This idiot waiter just brought us a bill. A bill for $1,200. She threw her hand toward Kevin like he was a piece of garbage on the floor. "He says you paid for your table, but not ours. Fix this immediately. Put your black card down right now. We are tired and we are ready to go home." The entire restaurant had stopped eating. The wealthy couple at table 5 was openly staring, forks halfway to their mouths. The businessman at table 6 was looking over the rim of his reading glasses. This was it, the moment of absolute truth. I walked slowly up to the table. I looked at the disgusting mess they had made. I looked at the empty wine bottles. I looked at Dylan, who had suddenly lost all his hedge fund bravado and was currently staring intensely at his leather shoes, refusing to make eye contact with me. I looked at my in-laws, Robert and Mary, who looked like they were about to have synchronized heart attacks. I glanced casually at the black leather folder resting near a spilled puddle of marinara sauce. "Sounds about right to me," I said calmly, my voice projecting clearly so the surrounding tables could hear. "For bottles of Barolo, a tomahawk steak, a seafood tower, lobster. Inflation is really tough these days. Isn't it, Dylan? Fix this," Chloe demanded, stepping forward and actually poking me hard in the chest with her index finger. "Stop playing your stupid little games, Joshua. We are your guests." I swatted her hand away from my chest. Hard. "You are not my guests," I said. I didn't yell, but the sheer venom in my voice made her step back. "I invited exactly 12 people tonight to celebrate my son. They are in the back room. You brought 10 completely uninvited people, hijacked a reserved table, ruined the seating arrangement, and ordered the most expensive items on the menu without even looking at the prices because you assumed I was your personal doormat." "We are family, Josh," Dylan suddenly chimed in, standing up awkwardly. He swayed a little on his feet. He was heavily intoxicated. "You don't treat family like this, man. Family shares." "Family asks, Dylan," I said, locking eyes with him until he looked away again. "Parasites invade." I heard an audible gasp from the woman at table 5. Chloe's eyes bulged out of her head. "How dare you call us that? I don't have $1,200, Joshua. We literally cannot pay this." "Then you shouldn't have ordered the tomahawk ribeye," I said, pointing directly at the massive, stripped bone sitting on Dylan's plate. "That is a market price item. It's not a value meal." I thought it was a set menu," Dylan stammered pathetically. "Like, included in the party package." "It was included," I said coldly, "for my actual guests. You were not part of the set." Chloe looked frantically around the room. The alcohol fog was lifting, and the crushing reality was closing in on her. She saw Julian standing near the kitchen doors with 2 large security guards. She saw the other diners openly judging her. Instantly, the anger vanished. She switched tactics. The furious screaming was replaced by manipulative, desperate tears. It was a performance I had seen 100 times. "Joshua, please." She dropped her voice to a pathetic, trembling whisper. She reached out and grabbed my forearm, digging her nails into my suit jacket. "Please don't do this. Not in front of the kids. Not in front of Mom and Dad. Just pay the bill. I swear to God, I'll pay you back next week. I promise." She froze. The tears stopped. Pure, unadulterated panic set in. "I'm begging you," she whispered, her voice cracking for real this time. "My credit cards, they're maxed out. Dylan's debit card won't go through for this amount. We literally can't pay this." "I cannot help you," I said, pulling my arm out of her grip. "My bill for my family is completely settled. This debt is between you and the restaurant." Before I walked away, I turned to Julian, who had stepped closer. "Julian," I asked loudly, "was the service Kevin provided at this table adequate despite the circumstances?" "Kevin tried his absolute best, sir," Julian said, eyeing the massive mess. "Then I strongly suggest you add the mandatory 20% gratuity for large parties directly to their bill," I said, my voice ringing out clearly. "Kevin worked incredibly hard tonight dealing with this nightmare, and he deserves to be compensated." I turned on my heel and began to walk away. "If you walk out that door, we are done." Chloe screamed at my back, losing her mind entirely. "Do you hear me, Joshua? I will never speak to you again." I stopped. I turned back around one last time. "Is that a promise, Chloe?" I asked, a genuine smile finally touching my face. "Because if it is, I would love to get that in writing. This is a moment that changed everything, when I finally regained control of my life. Thank you for your patience in getting this far. You are amazing. Please like the video and leave a comment below to let me know you've been with me. This will not only help more people find this story, but also let me know that my experiences are meaningful to someone. Your support is the biggest motivation for me to continue sharing the rest of this journey. I walked away from table 4 and didn't look back a single time. But as I headed down the corridor toward the executive room, the commotion instantly escalated behind me. I heard Julian politely but firmly asking Dylan for a credit card. I heard Chloe loudly sobbing, playing the ultimate victim. I heard Dylan yelling frantically into his cell phone, desperately trying to call a bank customer service line that had closed 4 hours ago. I stopped in the quiet hallway outside our private room. I closed my eyes, took a deep, centering breath, and let the adrenaline slowly drain out of my system. I smoothed my tie, put my warm, fatherly smile back on my face, and pushed the heavy oak doors open. "All right, who is ready for some presents?" I asked, clapping my hands together. Now, there is a massive piece of information I haven't told you yet. A piece of leverage that Chloe doesn't know. My in-laws don't know. Even Emily only knows half the truth about my finances. When Chloe was screaming at me in the restaurant, she called me a corporate stooge. She assumes I just have a decent salary and got lucky. She doesn't know that 5 years ago, I didn't just get a simple promotion. I quietly bought into my company. I own 15% of the logistics firm I work for, and one of our biggest, most lucrative clients just happens to be the massive restaurant hospitality group that owns Luca's. We handle their entire regional supply chain. We import their high-end Italian wine. We deliver the prime cuts of beef they serve. Julian knows this. The regional owner knows this. That is exactly why Julian was sweating bullets when he saw the chaos Chloe was causing. He wasn't just worried about an annoying walk-in customer. He was terrified of offending a Tier 1 corporate partner. When I handed Julian my black card earlier, it wasn't just a high-limit credit card. It was a corporate expense account. I absolutely had the authority to sign off on a business development expense. I could have literally waved my hand, swiped that card, and made Chloe's $1,240 bill vanish into thin air without ever feeling it in my bank account. But I actively chose not to, because bailing her out again wouldn't be generosity. It would be actively funding her delusion. Back in the room, Isaac was happily ripping the wrapping paper off a new drone from his friend Sam. He was beaming from ear to ear. "This is the best night ever, Dad," he yelled over the noise of the ripping paper. "I'm really glad, buddy," I said, feeling a massive weight lift off my chest. Emily walked up beside me. She kept her voice to a barely audible whisper. "Did you pay it, Josh?" She fully assumed I had. She assumed I had done what I always do: silently clean up her sister's toxic mess just to keep the peace and avoid a Thanksgiving argument. I looked into my wife's eyes. I decided right then to tell her the absolute truth. "No," I whispered back. "I didn't pay a dime." Emily's eyes widened in sheer terror. "What? Josh, they don't have that kind of money. What is going to happen to them?" "They will figure it out," I said calmly, holding her gaze. "They are adults. Dylan is 45 years old. If he can confidently order a market-price tomahawk steak to impress his wife's friend, he can figure out how to pay for it. But Mom and Dad are out there," Emily stammered, looking toward the door. "Your parents are a massive part of the problem, I said gently but firmly. "They are sitting out there drinking $140 wine they know they can't afford because they think my salary is their personal safety net. They think their inheritance is just going to cover everything eventually. Tonight, the net is gone." Emily looked completely torn. For a split second, I actually thought she was going to grab her purse, run out to the dining room, and hand Dylan her own credit card. But then she stopped. She looked over at Isaac. She looked at how incredibly happy and safe he felt, completely oblivious to the toxic wasteland just 40 feet away. She took a deep, shaky breath. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." It was just one small word, but it was a massive, monumental victory for our marriage. We wrapped up the party at exactly 9:45 p.m. Now, the final logistical challenge was extraction. How do I get 12 happy people out of this restaurant without forcing them to walk past the active crime scene at table 4? I cracked the door and flagged Julian down as he hurried past. "Julian, is there a back exit through the kitchen?" "Yes, Joshua," Julian said quickly. "It leads directly to the staff parking lot and the rear alley. I can have the valets bring your cars around to the back immediately." "Do it," I said. We led our group of 12 out through the bustling commercial kitchen. The 10-year-old boys thought it was the coolest adventure ever. "Whoa, look at the fire on that stove," Isaac shouted. The line cooks, briefed by Julian, smiled and waved at the kids as we passed. We stepped out of the heavy metal back doors into the cool, crisp night air of the alleyway. The valets already had our cars lined up with the engines running. As I was buckling Isaac into the back seat of my truck, I paused. I could hear faint, echoing shouting coming from the front entrance of the restaurant, wrapping around the brick building. It was Chloe. I could hear her screeching voice perfectly. "This is theft. I am calling my lawyer first thing in the morning." For the record, Chloe does not have a lawyer. She has a friend from her gym who works as a part-time paralegal for a traffic court attorney. Just before we pulled out, my mother-in-law, Mary, suddenly appeared in the alley. She had clearly run around the side of the building to find us. She looked visibly shaken, her face pale under the harsh yellow streetlights. "Joshua, Emily," Mary gasped, leaning against my truck window. We didn't know." "Didn't know what, Mary?" I asked, keeping the window rolled halfway up. "That you weren't paying," she stammered, tears welling in her eyes. "We honestly thought. Chloe swore to us that." "Chloe lied, Mary," I said, my voice devoid of any sympathy. "Chloe always lies, and you always choose to believe her. It's easier for you." Mary looked down at the pavement. "But Joshua, they are in serious trouble inside. Dylan's card was declined. They literally cannot pay the bill. The manager is talking about calling the police." "Then maybe Chloe should sell her designer handbag," I said flatly. "Good night, Mary. Drive safe." I rolled the window up, effectively cutting off whatever excuse she was about to make. I put the truck in drive and pulled out of the alley. As we drove slowly past the front entrance of the restaurant to get to the main road, I couldn't help myself. I glanced over. There, parked directly in front of the valet stand, was a police cruiser. The bright blue and red lights were flashing silently, illuminating the front of the restaurant. Through the large glass windows, I could clearly see a uniformed police officer standing inside the lobby with Julian. I saw Chloe frantically waving her arms in the air, her face twisted in panic. But I also noticed something else, something that made me almost laugh out loud. Ashley, Chloe's supposedly loyal best friend, the woman who had happily gorged herself on my unbought lobster, was nowhere to be seen. I found out later from Kevin that the exact second the bill hit the table and the screaming started, Ashley suddenly announced she needed to change her baby's diaper. She grabbed her 2 toddlers, walked briskly toward the restrooms, took a sharp left out the front doors, and completely ghosted them. She stuck Chloe with her massive share of the bill. "Don't look out the window, buddy," I told Isaac, keeping my eyes on the road. "Just look at your new drone." "Okay, Dad," he said happily. We drove the rest of the way home in complete silence. But it wasn't a tense, awkward silence. It was the profound, beautiful silence of relief. It was the silence of a massive, toxic bomb that had finally been defused, dismantled, and left far behind us. We got home around 10:30 p.m. The drive had been quiet, but it was the kind of quiet that follows a massive, clearing thunderstorm. The air in the truck felt lighter. I carried Isaac upstairs. He was completely exhausted, clutching his new drone to his chest. He was asleep before his head even hit the pillow. He had absolutely no idea about the monumental family earthquake that had just occurred a few miles away. To him, it was just the best birthday he had ever had. That alone told me I had made the right decision. I walked quietly down the stairs and found Emily in the kitchen. She was leaning against the marble countertop, staring blankly at the dark window. I walked over, wrapped my arms around her from behind, and kissed the top of her head. I opened the refrigerator, bypassed the expensive bottles of wine we keep for special occasions, and pulled out a cheap, $12 bottle of red table wine we use for cooking. I poured 2 large glasses and handed one to her. We clinked our glasses together. I took a sip. Let me tell you, that cheap, acidic $12 wine tasted better than any vintage Barolo I have ever had in my entire life. Tasted like absolute victory. "So," Emily said softly, looking down at her glass. "The police. I saw the flashing lights, Josh. Did they actually get arrested?" Before I could answer, Emily's phone, which she had left face down on the kitchen island, began to vibrate wildly. It had been vibrating constantly for the last hour, but we had both ignored it. Now, she finally reached out and flipped it over. The screen lit up. 42 missed calls. There were missed calls from Chloe, from Dylan, from Mary, from Robert, and even 2 from Ashley, who was probably trying to figure out if the coast was clear. "Don't answer it," I said firmly, putting my hand over hers. She stared at the glowing screen. A massive block of text messages from Chloe suddenly populated the screen, coming in rapid succession. Emily read them out loud, her voice trembling slightly in the quiet kitchen. "You are a monster. I hope you feel incredibly good about yourself, Joshua. A rich, arrogant man stepping on his own family just to feel powerful. The police are literally here. The manager is threatening to call a lawyer. Mom is crying hysterically. You completely humiliated us. You left your own blood behind. If we get a divorce over this financial stress, it is entirely your fault." Emily stopped reading and looked up at me. Her eyes were wide, filled with a decade of conditioned guilt. "Are we monsters, Josh? Did we go too far?" "No," I said, my voice rock solid. "We are teachers, and tonight was just a very expensive, highly necessary lesson." I gently took the phone from her hands. "Let me reply to this." I typed out a response, making sure every single word was precise. "I am not rich because I step on the poor, Chloe. I am financially comfortable because I do not buy $140 bottles of wine when I have a negative balance in my checking account. I did not humiliate you. You humiliated yourself by trying to steal from a restaurant and from my family. You made your bed. Now sleep in it. Chloe replied almost instantly, her typing indicator flashing frantically. Mom is crying in the parking lot. You ruined the entire family dynamic. We were supposed to share. I typed back one final message. Mom is crying because she spent 40 years raising a daughter who genuinely believes that theft is a love language. Do not contact my wife again tonight. I hit send. Then I went into the settings of Emily's phone, blocked Chloe's number, blocked Dylan's number, and blocked my in-laws. Just for tonight, I told Emily, handing the phone back to her. Give your mind some actual peace. The world will still be there tomorrow. She took a deep breath, took a long drink of her wine, and nodded. She slept through the night for the first time in weeks without waking up grinding her teeth. The full, unvarnished story of what actually happened inside Luca's after we drove away came out the next morning. I got a phone call from Julian around 9 a.m. while I was drinking my coffee on the back porch. He was calling from his office at the restaurant to give me the official debrief and to apologize again for the disturbance. Joshua, you will not believe the absolute circus that took place after you left, Julian said, his voice a mixture of exhaustion and professional amusement. Apparently, Chloe and Dylan genuinely did not have the money. It wasn't a bluff. They weren't just being cheap. They were entirely broke. They sat at that wrecked table and frantically tried to run 3 different credit cards. Every single one of them was declined, maxed out to the absolute limit. Dylan then tried to use his main checking account debit card. Declined for insufficient funds. They spent an agonizing hour sitting in the lobby, desperately calling their friends, begging someone to Venmo or Zelle them the cash. They called everyone in their contacts. Dylan even tried to call his estranged brother. No one picked up. Everyone knows better than to lend money to those two. Eventually, the general manager of Luca's, Julian's boss, got incredibly tired of the dramatic, crying scene they were causing in his high-end lobby. He walked over, crossed his arms, and calmly informed them that he was pressing formal criminal charges for theft of services. That is exactly when he picked up the phone and called the local precinct. That is when the police cruiser pulled up out front. To completely avoid being handcuffed and put into the back of a squad car on a Saturday night in front of half the city, Chloe and Dylan had to make a humiliating, desperate deal with the manager and the police officer. Chloe was forced to empty her designer purse onto the host stand. She had to leave her physical driver's license and her brand new iPhone 14 Pro Max in the manager's office safe as collateral. Dylan, trying to salvage some shred of his fake hedge fund dignity, dramatically unclasped his heavy gold watch and slammed it on the counter, telling the manager it was a vintage Rolex worth $10,000. Julian told me the manager took one look at the sweeping mechanism of the second hand, laughed in Dylan's face, and informed the police officer it was a cheap knockoff. The officer threatened to arrest Dylan right there for attempting to defraud a business with counterfeit goods. They were given exactly 24 hours to return to the restaurant with the $1,240 in cold, hard cash, or the restaurant would officially file the police report and issue a warrant. But here is the absolute kicker, the part that proves physics always wins. To get that cash on a Sunday morning when the physical bank branches were closed, Dylan had to drive his leased car to 3 different out-of-network ATMs. He had to aggressively tap into his account's overdraft protection limit. Do you know the massive predatory penalty fees banks charge when you pull cash from an overdrawn account at an out-of-network machine? He probably paid $70 or $80 in sheer fees just to scrape together the daily withdrawal limits. He drove back to Luca's on Sunday afternoon, looking like a broken man, handed a thick stack of $20 bills to the manager, and quietly collected his wife's phone and ID. Julian also informed me that their photograph, a very clear shot taken from the restaurant's security cameras of them screaming at Kevin, is now permanently laminated and taped up in the kitchen near the server station. They are banned from Luca's for life. But the fallout from that night wasn't just financial. The social and structural collapse of their fake empire was immediate and brutal. Remember Ashley? The friend Chloe brought along just to impress? When the bill came and the massive reality check hit the table, Ashley realized she was about to be asked to split a $1,200 tab. She grabbed her diaper bag, scooped up her toddlers, told Chloe she was taking them to the restroom to clean them up, and walked straight out the front glass doors. She didn't leave a single dollar for the oysters she ate or the wine she drank. She completely ghosted them. When Chloe got her phone back from the restaurant on Sunday, she apparently called Ashley screaming. Ashley blocked her number. Just like that, Chloe lost her so-called best friend and her remaining social dignity in the exact same weekend. But the absolute climax of this entire saga didn't happen until Tuesday morning. I found out the meticulous details of this part from a mutual friend of Dylan's who works at his hardware store. Remember how I said Dylan had to completely drain his checking account into the deep negative using his overdraft protection just to pay the restaurant manager? Well, in the chaos of the weekend, they completely forgot about their automated bills. On Monday morning, a massive electronic withdrawal attempted to process through their checking account. It was the monthly lease payment for Chloe's precious, status symbol Porsche Cayenne. Because the account was deeply overdrawn from the ATM withdrawals, the automated check bounced immediately. It was returned for insufficient funds. Now, normally, a leasing company will give you a short grace period. But this wasn't the first time they had missed a payment. In fact, they were already 3 months deeply in arrears. The leasing company had been actively hunting for that vehicle, but Chloe had been hiding it in the garage. The bounce check on Monday triggered an immediate red flag in the leasing company's system. They didn't wait. They didn't call to negotiate. They dispatched a recovery team. On Tuesday morning, Chloe walked out of her front door wearing matching, high-end athleisure wear, holding her expensive insulated coffee cup, preparing to drive to her mid-morning yoga class. She walked down her driveway and stopped dead. Her luxury tank was completely gone. She thought it had been stolen. She actually called the police in a complete panic. The dispatcher calmly informed her that the vehicle had not been stolen. It had been legally repossessed by the dealership at 4:30 in the morning. Her neighbors, the people she constantly looked down upon and bragged to, were all out on their porches getting their morning mail, watching her stand in her empty driveway having a complete, visible meltdown. The illusion was shattered. The mask had completely fallen off, and there was absolutely nothing underneath it but crippling debt and lies. The repossession of the car forced a massive, unavoidable confession. Dylan could no longer hide the reality of their situation. He sat his in-laws, Robert and Mary, down in their living room on Tuesday night and finally admitted the truth. They were not wealthy. They were not even comfortable. They were currently drowning in over $60,000 of high-interest credit card debt. Dylan's salary from the hardware store barely covered the minimum monthly interest payments. They had been floating their entire lavish lifestyle by opening new credit cards to pay off the old ones. Dylan confessed that they had been desperately banking on my salary to cover major family expenses. And worse, they had been secretly banking on a large future inheritance from Robert and Mary to eventually wipe their slate clean. They were essentially waiting for my in-laws to die so they could pay off their luxury vacations and designer clothes. Robert and Mary were absolutely horrified. The scales finally fell from their eyes. They wanted to help, they wanted to immediately write a check to fix it. But they couldn't. They were completely tapped out. They had already dipped heavily into their own retirement savings over the years to fund Chloe's emergencies. The emergencies I had refused to pay for. They had nothing left to give her without jeopardizing their own ability to survive. The golden child had finally tarnished, and the rust was spreading everywhere. On Wednesday evening, Emily's phone rang. I had unblocked her parents' numbers the day before. It was her father, Robert. I was sitting on the couch next to Emily, and I could hear his voice clearly through the speaker. He sounded incredibly old. He sounded defeated, broken, and completely exhausted. "Emily," Robert said, his voice cracking, We know about the car. Dylan told us everything. The debt, the lies, everything." Emily didn't say anything. She just sat there, holding the phone, staring at the coffee table. "I am so incredibly sorry," Robert continued, and I could hear Mary sobbing softly in the background. It sounded like it physically hurt him to force the words out of his mouth. "We were completely wrong. We spoiled her, Emily. We thought if we just helped her a little more, if we just gave her one more push, she would finally get on her own 2 feet. But she never does. She just takes it and asks for more." Emily took a deep breath. Her voice was remarkably steady. "No, Dad. She doesn't. She never has. Your husband—" Robert paused, taking a ragged breath. "Joshua, he was right. What he did at the restaurant. It was harsh. God, it was so hard to watch. But maybe it was exactly what needed to happen. It was the only way to break the cycle." Emily closed her eyes. A single tear rolled down her cheek, but she wasn't crying out of sadness. "Dad," Emily said gently, "I love you. But Joshua didn't just do that to teach Chloe a lesson. He did it to protect me, and he did it to protect Isaac. We cannot be her safety net anymore. We have our own family to raise." "I know, sweetheart," Robert whispered. "I know. We won't ask you for anything ever again. I promise." The call ended. Emily put the phone down on the table. She looked at me for a long, quiet moment. The heavy, dark cloud of guilt that she had carried on her shoulders for her entire adult life. The guilt of being the lucky sister, the one who married a stable man, the one who had a peaceful home, finally evaporated. She realized in that exact moment that luck had absolutely nothing to do with it. It was about choices. We deliberately chose to live within our financial means. We chose to communicate, to save, to plan for our future. Chloe chose to live inside a toxic, narcissistic fantasy. And living inside a fantasy is the most expensive lifestyle on the planet. Emily leaned over and buried her face in my chest. She cried for a few minutes, letting go of decades of frustration, manipulation, and forced compliance. When she finally pulled back, she wiped her eyes and smiled. "You saved us," she whispered. "If we had paid that restaurant bill on Saturday, they would have done it again at Christmas. And then again at Isaac's next birthday. And then at his high school graduation. It would have never stopped." "Physics, I said, kissing her forehead. "Every single action has an equal and opposite reaction. For 10 years, we have been acting as the shock absorbers for their terrible decisions. I just decided to stop absorbing the impact. They hit the wall at full speed, and the wall didn't move. The next few months were profoundly transformative for our family. The daily, anxiety-inducing phone calls from Mary completely stopped. Without that constant, heavy infusion of manufactured drama and emotional dumping, Emily blossomed. Her chronic tension headaches completely vanished. She started sleeping through the night. She started painting again, a hobby she had abandoned years ago because she never had the mental energy for it. We didn't see or speak to Chloe for 6 entire months. The radio silence was glorious. The next time we finally saw Chloe and Dylan in person was at our annual Thanksgiving gathering. Historically, Thanksgiving had always been hosted at Robert and Mary's house, and it had always been an absolute nightmare. Chloe would show up late, complain about the food, demand that Emily serve her kids, and spend the entire afternoon bragging about whatever new luxury item she had bought. But this year, I firmly put my foot down. "We are hosting," I told Emily, "at our house, on our strict terms. If they want to come, they follow our rules. If they cause a scene, they leave." They arrived promptly at 1 p.m. I was standing in the kitchen, carving the turkey, when I heard the distinct, rattling sound of a struggling engine pulling up our driveway. I looked out the window. It wasn't a sleek, black Porsche Cayenne. It was a silver, heavily used, 10-year-old Honda Civic. The paint was peeling slightly on the hood. Chloe stepped out of the passenger side. The visual transformation was jarring. She wasn't wearing an oversized designer sweater or massive sunglasses. She was wearing a simple pair of denim jeans and a plain, unbranded cardigan. Her hair was pulled back into a simple ponytail. She didn't look like a wealthy socialite anymore. She looked remarkably average. She looked smaller. But honestly, For the very first time in the 10 years I had known her, she looked real. She was finally living in actual reality. She walked into our house quietly. She didn't make a grand entrance. She didn't shout for everyone to look at her. She walked into the kitchen, carrying a store-bought pecan pie, and set it on the counter. "Happy Thanksgiving, Joshua," she said softly, not quite meeting my eyes. She didn't apologize to me. I knew she wouldn't. A true narcissist is physically incapable of uttering the words, "I was wrong," or "I am sorry." But she didn't demand anything either. She didn't act entitled. The arrogant fire in her eyes had been completely extinguished by the cold water of bankruptcy. During dinner, she ate her food quietly. She actually complimented Emily on the stuffing. And when the meal was over, instead of retreating to the couch to scroll on her phone while my wife cleaned up, Chloe stood up, grabbed her empty plate, walked it into the kitchen, and actually started rinsing it in the sink. I almost dropped my wine glass. Later that afternoon, while the kids were playing in the backyard, Dylan walked out into the garage where I was getting some extra folding chairs. He stood there awkwardly for a moment, shifting his weight from foot to foot. He looked incredibly tired. The dark bags under his eyes were prominent. "Good to see you, Josh," Dylan finally said, holding out his hand. I looked at his hand for a second, then reached out and shook it firmly. "Good to see you too, Dylan. How are things?" He let out a long, heavy sigh. "Tough, man. Really tough. I picked up a second job working the night shift at a warehouse inventory center. 60 hours a week now. We are working with a credit counselor to consolidate the debt so we don't lose the house. It's a massive hole to dig out of. It takes time," I said neutrally. I wasn't going to offer him a loan. He knew better than to ask. Dylan looked at me, and for the first time there was no fake bravado. There was no hedge fund posturing. There was just a tired man facing the consequences of his actions. But hidden in that exhaustion, I saw a new, distinct layer of respect in his eyes. "I was angry at you for a long time after that night at the restaurant," Dylan admitted, looking down at the concrete floor. "I blamed you for embarrassing us. But the counselor we are seeing told us something. She said hitting absolute rock bottom is the only way some people finally wake up. So, yeah, message received. Josh." He knew I saw right through him. He knew I wasn't a mark anymore. And because the boundary was firmly established, we could actually exist in the same room without tension. So here we are. It has been exactly 1 full year since the infamous incident at Table 4. Isaac is 11 years old now. Last week, we went back to Luca's Italian steakhouse to celebrate his 11th birthday. This time, it was just the 3 of us. Me, Emily, and Isaac. When we walked through the double doors, Julian was standing at the host stand. His face lit up with a massive, genuine smile. He walked out from behind the podium and shook my hand warmly. "Joshua, Emily, happy birthday, young man," Julian said, patting Isaac on the shoulder. He treated us like absolute royalty. "I have your favorite alcove perfectly prepared." We sat at the table. It was incredibly peaceful. No screaming toddlers, no shattered wine glasses, no fake wealth. Just a family enjoying a beautiful meal together. I opened the heavy leather menu and glanced at the wine list. I smiled to myself. The 2018 Barolo that Chloe had chugged like water had gone up in price. It is now $150 a bottle. Inflation really is tough. I closed the menu and ordered a simple, delicious glass of the house red wine. People on the internet, and even some distant relatives, have asked me if I regret what I did. They ask if I regret humiliating my sister-in-law in a public place. They ask if I feel guilty for indirectly causing her to lose her luxury car, or for pushing their marriage to the absolute brink of divorce. They tell me I should have just paid the bill and dealt with it privately later. I think about that question sometimes. And then I think about the $1,240. I didn't just save that money in my checking account. The very next Monday morning, I took exactly $1,240 and transferred it directly into Isaac's $529 college savings investment plan. That money is currently sitting in a diversified index fund. It is actively growing. It is quietly gathering compound interest every single day. Instead of being turned into literal sewage by Chloe and Dylan, instead of funding an illusion that was destroying their lives anyway, that exact sum of money is going to help send my son to a good university. It is going to buy his textbooks. It is going to help secure his future. I realized a profound truth that night at the restaurant. Being generous to toxic, entitled people isn't actually generosity. It is enabling. It is actively funding their delusion. It is paying for the heavy bricks that they use to build their own financial and emotional prisons. By completely cutting Chloe off, by refusing to be her safety net, I didn't just save my own money. I didn't just save my wife's sanity. I genuinely believe I might have actually saved Chloe's marriage and her future. They were violently forced to face their chaotic finances. They are struggling now, yes. They are clipping coupons, driving a rusty car, and working terrible hours. But they are finally struggling with the truth. They are no longer drowning in a comfortable, toxic lie. Sometimes, the absolute best, most loving gift you can give yourself and your immediate family is an unbreakable boundary. And sometimes, the most profoundly helpful gift you can give a narcissist is a no. A loud, public, unyielding, unapologetic no. My name is Joshua. I am a logistics director, and I can tell you this with absolute certainty. You cannot fit a lifestyle of vintage champagne onto a budget of tap water. And you absolutely, positively cannot fit it onto my tab. The moment I walked out of that restaurant, leaving Chloe screaming at the terrified waiter, I felt a massive, suffocating weight lift off my shoulders. It was a weight I had been carrying for 10 years. I finally took back total control of my life, my hard-earned finances, and my family's peace. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Before you go, I want to leave you with a quick thought. Something I really had to learn the hard way. We are constantly taught by society that family means everything, and that we must sacrifice our own peace, our own boundaries, and our own financial security just to keep toxic relatives happy. But that is a dangerous trap. True family respects you. True family doesn't view you as an ATM or an emotional punching bag. Setting a hard boundary isn't an act of cruelty. It is an act of profound self-respect. When you continuously bail out someone who refuses to change, you aren't helping them walk. You are just carrying them closer to the edge of the cliff. Sometimes, letting gravity take over and letting them hit the ground is the only way they will ever learn how to stand up on their own 2 feet. Don't set yourself on fire just to keep manipulative people warm. I really hope this story gave someone out there the courage to draw their own line in the sand today. What is the biggest lesson you took away from my experience with Chloe? Have you ever had to cut off an entitled family member? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments, or simply drop the word good if you agree that boundaries are the ultimate form of self-care. It lets me know that my story resonated with you. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so we can keep sharing these journeys together. Stay strong, protect your peace, and I will see you in the next one.